right, well,
don't forget to share screen.
Evening, dearly beloved brothers and sisters in our Lord Jesus Christ and young people who are listening in. It's morning over here in Australia. Actually, it's a lovely morning here at the Hebron campsite because I'm currently with a whole group of young men and brethren doing a School of the Prophets. So they're currently in with the other speaker at the moment. So we've got time here to share with you on this Zoom call that Brother Nathan invited me to share with you some time ago. It was lovely to hear from him again. We go back quite a way to a School of the Prophets that was done in the UK, actually. And so it's nice to share this time with you all. I'm going to just share my screen here with you all. And many of you probably don't know who I am. We've only traveled to the United States. We haven't got to Canada yet. It's on our wish list after this pandemic. Who knows when that might finish, but we've only been to California. So you may not know who I am. I've just got a picture there of myself and my wife, Susanna, and a picture of our 3 children. Leah is on the right, Ethan is in the middle. He's actually up here at School of the Prophets with us, and Bethany's on the left. Leah, Ethan, and Bethany. And I just put this one up because we had a trip to Israel only recently, just before the pandemic. Our daughter Leah is now married to the young lad on the right of the screen there, Sam. But we were under the Wailing Wall here. And so it's a picture, it's the only one I could actually find of us all together in the same picture. But the tour guide that took us around, her name was Leah as well. And funnily enough, she came from Canada. So I thought it was appropriate to show a picture of us with a Canadian. Well, what about this subject? Well, this subject has intrigued me for quite a long time. And a little quote that I discovered from a wonderful brother, Brother Dennis Gillett, made me investigate it further. It's a fascinating study, and I think it's quite underrated. I think the reason that it's underrated is because of our reticence to be aligned with the evangelical views that claim, you know, Jesus is my friend, and the church's cliches about focusing on God is love and he loves me. So we sort of shy away from that a bit, but we do so going to the other extreme and forgetting that the scriptures presents this subject from the point of view that this is God's ambition, his plan, his purpose. And I don't know about you, but I hadn't heard too many talks in my lifetime on this subject of friendship at all. So this comment that Brother Dennis Gillett made, he said this. He said, friendship is the highest form of fellowship. And he's not saying that friendship doesn't exist where there is, fellowship doesn't exist where there is no friendship. He's just saying that friendship is the highest form of fellowship. You know, there are people that have lived in previous generations that we would say we are in fellowship with. But we never got to know them. We never got to see them. We never got to develop a friendship with them. Some people live overseas, like yourselves. There's many there that don't know me and I don't know you, but we are in fellowship together, but we've never had the opportunity to develop a friendship. But where you can have friendship, in addition to fellowship, Brother Dennis says that's the highest form of fellowship. He says that where friendship exists within fellowship, then that fellowship's greatly enhanced. And I thought it was a really wonderful quote, and it made me go and look at this subject in a lot more detail. So I did a series on friendship. And what I discovered was that friendship is really right at the heart, right at the essence, the core, the center of the gospel. It surprised me, actually. I wasn't expecting it, but that's really the where this subject takes us. Now, of course, we know that the world's view of friendship is very shaky, because it's all about what you need to do to me. All right? This is who I am. You just got to accept me. I don't need to change. This is me. If you can't accept me, it's not my problem, it's your problem. So right from the outset, we're going to discover a little bit tonight. In fact, we're only going to scratch the surface. This subject's really big in the Bible. It goes right through from Genesis to Revelation. Just going to scratch the surface. But we're going to discover that the fundamental essence of friendship begins not with other people, but begins with ourselves. And of course, the reading that we had read for us tonight, I would say is the friendship chapter, isn't it, of the Bible. Many subjects in the Bible have a particular chapter that you could go to, like baptism, Romans 6. So resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15. Friendship, Proverbs 27. And you might have noticed that the whole of that chapter in Proverbs is all about, in some form or another, maintaining relationships. And in particular, you will have perhaps noticed as well that this idea of maintaining relationships comes up particularly when it revolves around friends and friendship. And so the word friend occurs quite a number of times in Proverbs 27. You'll see it there in verse 6. It comes up again in verse 9. You'll see it there twice in verse 10. It continues on, this idea of friendships there in verse 14. And then you'll see it there in verse 17. And that one is actually the one that I chose to entitle the series that we did on friendship, Iron Sharpening Iron. That's what true friendship is all about. But not only do those verses that mention friends talk about friendship, really the whole chapter is about maintaining and building healthy friendships and relationships and keeping them in a healthy manner so that we can glorify God. And I've got a list there. We're not going to spend much time in Proverbs at all, actually, because we're going to focus in on the gospel and how that reveals friendship. But you may like to note just some of the things that are addressed in Proverbs 27 about maintaining a balanced and healthy friendship and keeping it in tune. And it goes on in verse 10 to 14. All the avenues that come across your daily path when you're interacting with other individuals. And sometimes those individuals are your closest friends. Sometimes they're your family too. How do you maintain and keep those healthy friendships? Because we're going to discover that God asks and demands that we maintain these friendships to build relationships based on the truth. The truth is all about seeking, forging, and maintaining healthy relationships, meaningful, tangible, real friendships. I don't know if you, what Canada and the brothers and sisters over there, how they maintain their friendships. But I remember here in Australia, here in Adelaide, something some time ago, which we don't tend to do as much anymore. We used to just drop in on other brothers and sisters' homes. We might do so for a working bee on their house. But nowadays, we don't tend to do that, probably because we're too affluent and we dare not ask, unskilled workers to come and work on our house. And I'd hold my hand up as being one of the first to be frightful of asking, unprofessionals to come and work on my house, particularly if it's my family who are in the building trade. You sort of sometimes, in times past, didn't care about the quality. It was about maintaining the friendship. And if I can help you and you can help me, great, let's invite the family over. Maybe have a barbecue for lunch and rectify those maintenance problems on the house. Or maybe just dropping in to check in on each other. Nowadays, it seems a bit harder. You have to make an appointment. Particularly at the moment, in the last 2 years, of course, household numbers haven't been allowed in Adelaide to exceed sometimes no more than 10. So it's quite difficult to maintain a healthy relationship with friends. Doing the readings together and just dropping in and saying, have you got time this week, outside of Sunday, outside of Wednesday, or Bible class night, whatever night that might be. Maybe go on holidays together, choose friends to go on holidays with. A bit difficult at the moment with the pandemic, but nevertheless, has that been your habit? So this idea of friendship, we probably were a lot better at it when I was growing up 20, 30 years ago. And I think our affluent society has caused us to be a bit more insular. So we want to delve in and discover what it is about being a friend. As we said, friendships don't start with changing other people. Friendships start with me. Just some points about that. It's not about what I need, it's about what I need to be. It's not about what others can do for me. That's quite selfish, isn't it? It's all about what I can do for others. And of course, you can imagine and think about the life of our Lord Jesus Christ as we're going through these points too. And he's the role model. He's the one we seek to follow in his steps. It's not about how I can change others. It's about how I can change myself to be a friend that others would value. It's quite a challenge, isn't it? To think of it in that light. Well, I want to go beginning this subject by going right back to the beginning of the Bible, right back to Genesis chapter 1. Because there's something interesting that happens here in Genesis chapter 1. You'll remember, know that the repeated phrase in this chapter, the most striking feature about the whole of creation is this phrase that keeps coming up, and it was good. You'll notice that it's at the end of day 1 in Genesis chapter 1, that God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And at the end of each creative act, God says it was good. You'll notice actually that it's not mentioned on day 2. It's mentioned on every other day, but it's not mentioned on day 2. Why is that? Well, actually, the creative work on day 2 doesn't finish until day 3. And so you get this phrase, and it was good, occurred twice on day 3. You'll see it there in verse 10, the creative work of the waters being divided finishes on day 3, and God saw that it was good. And then, of course, the pulling away of the seas to reveal the dry land. At the end of verse 12, God saw that that was good too. So every creative act, God says it was good, something probably worth colouring in. We should have it coloured in there in verse 4, verse 10, verse 12, verse 18, verse 25. And of course, the word good is an old Anglo-Saxon word that is really the basis for our English word God. As New Unger's Bible Dictionary puts it, the English word is identical with the Anglo-Saxon word for good, and is therefore it is believed that the name God refers to divine goodness. And that's what we see in this chapter. There was nothing lacking in any of the creative acts. Everything was just right. The right balance, the right harmony. There's no deficiency, there's no incompleteness, there's no inability to function. Everything fulfilled the purpose for which it was designed. Life was teeming all around. And in verse 31, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And so we get this word very, intensifying the adjective good. It's telling us that there was absolutely nothing out of place. And it's interesting that up until day 5, everything God made is described as good. But once man is placed upon the earth, it's described as very good. It's not presumed good. It's not simply good. It's not slightly good or goodish. Everything is perfectly good. Now, why am I labouring this? Well, it's because it makes all the more significance when we come to chapter 2 and we find these words in chapter 2 and verse 18. And Yahweh Elohim said, "It is not good that the man should be alone." Now, nothing's changed from chapter 1, verse 31. Everything God has made is still very good. But of course, we know that chapter 1, verse 31 is uttered after the events of chapter 2. Chapter 2 actually gets inserted back into day 6 in chapter 1. And what chapter 2, verse 18 is telling us is that God's creative acts were not yet complete. There was still one part missing, a very vital part, so vital that if he didn't do something about it, it would be not good for the man. Dwelling in solitude was not good, says God. He would suffer. It would be detrimental. The Jerusalem Bible says, "It is not right that man should be alone." Now, you've got to ask yourself the question, hang on, Adam actually, was he really alone? Was he sort of on his own in the garden? Well, no, there were animals there. And we know that some of those animals could actually talk. The serpent certainly could talk. Why couldn't Adam build a relationship, say, talking-wise, dialogue-wise, with the serpent and not feel alone? Well, it's because in verse 18, it goes on to say, "I will make him and help meet for him." This phrase, helpmeet, is crucial to understanding this idea of not being alone. The idea behind this phrase really is a companion that was suitable. So although there were animals there, they were unsuitable companions. The idea is one who is able to help. You'll get that from the New King James Version in a footnote. A helper as before him, as before his face. Someone he could look in the eye and see himself in appearance, in thought, in empathy, in compatibility. Someone who is suitable, and the animals just weren't suitable companions. Now, while in the first instance, this was clearly Eve who became his wife, she nonetheless depicts the essence of a companion who can help. The idea extends beyond just husbands and wives. Not everyone's going to get married. Not everyone has a husband and wife. And sometimes a husband may lose his wife. A wife may lose her husband. A companion is anyone that can provide the sense of fulfilled relationship. It's really the core principle of true friendship, to be there for each other, whether married or unmarried, whether young or old, whether male or female. To be alone is a very desolate place indeed. And God made man deliberately a social being with social feelings, social needs, social tendencies. I liked this quote from the Cambridge Bible commentary, which says that man was created a social creature. His full powers cannot be developed by physically and mental work alone, nor his moral being by self-discipline in solitude. His faculties and his character require to be expanded and beautified by the duties of domestic and social life, as a member of a family, as a friend, as a fellow worker, as a citizen. To be alone is not good. It does not promote his fullest life or his best service. You cannot develop the character of God on your own. That's what it's saying. You can't do it. You can't live the truth in a cave, so to speak. And maybe, speaking from my point of view, I'm talking about a man cave, brethren. You can't live the truth by hiding away in your man cave. You know, Elijah had to learn that lesson. I'm alone, he said to God, from a cave, funnily enough. And it wasn't doing anything good to his health. He was utterly and devastatingly depressed. And I think you'll find that the description of Elijah as he moped his way down to Mount Horeb is one of the most depressed descriptions recorded in Scripture. It doesn't take 40 days to go from where he was down to Mount Sinai. It takes probably only about 10, if that. But there were some mornings that Elijah just never got up, never got out of bed, so to speak. He was utterly dejected. But God told him, you're not alone, Elijah. There's 7,000 you could be reaching out to and helping, and they could be helping you too. 7,000. That's a pretty big ecclesia, isn't it? Lots of helpful companionship couldn't be found there for Elijah. But he was could have been found there for Elijah, I should say. But he was feeling lonely. And it was not good. It was not good for his mental health. So if man prior to the fall, as we've just seen in Genesis 2, needed companionship, well, how much more after the fall? So this is a very important subject. It's got some core lessons that hark right back to the seedbed of the Bible, to Genesis. And it was deemed important by Yahweh himself. Now, when I was doing this subject, I did a bit of research on friendship, and in particular, some surveys that have been produced from different universities and governments around the world. And in 2014, from the University of Chicago, they produced a report, a survey, where they tracked 2,000 people aged 50 and over for a 6-year period. What they discovered was quite astonishing. They discovered that loneliness is really bad for your health. Like, loneliness is a killer. I was quite startled. I didn't even contemplate that loneliness could kill. This is the statistics whereby they presented What was the likelihood of you having a premature death through loneliness compared to people that weren't? And what they saw was that loneliness was twice as likely to kill you as obesity. And we always get taught about being healthy and not being obese. That's drummed into you from school, from family, from friends. But loneliness never gets touched. There's a 14% increased likeliness of you dying from loneliness, twice as much as obesity and not quite as much as poverty. 14%, they say that that's equated to having 15 cigarettes a day. There was a similar report in the UK that found that 1 in 10 often feel lonely. Half of those who took the survey said that they felt extreme loneliness on weekends, which is quite normal to expect because weekends is where the social activity takes place. You might be working during the week, so of course, the weekends you'll notice the loneliness. But 3/4 suffered loneliness more so at night, going through the night on your own. Now, the reports were not simply tracking people who lived alone. So when we say loneliness, we don't mean people that live only on their own. We're talking also about people who felt lonely, even though they're in houses with other people. They felt lonely or did not have any fulfilled relationships. And that really is the key, having a fulfilled, meaningful relationship. Now, that's quite a staggering assessment, isn't it? Those two surveys are quite an astounding assessment from those two studies. But from Genesis 2, that's exactly what we should expect. It is not good, said God, to be alone. So the health systems of the world are just catching up with what God said 6,000 years ago. And this statement from a well-known author, statesman, and scientist, Sir Francis Bacon, said that the worst solitude is to be destitute of sincere friendship. So here's some facts, brothers and sisters and young people. Fact number 1, everyone needs friends. That's how God made us. But here's fact number 2. Some who are listening to this talk will have lots of friends. Some will have a few friends, but there's a high probability that some may not even have any friends, any meaningful friends. Now, I don't know you, as I've said. You don't know me. I don't know which group you might belong out of those 3. But I'm going to be speaking to all 3 groups. Actually, not me. The scriptures will be our guide and faithful examples from the ages gone by. They're the ones to emulate and to follow and provide guidance on this subject. Because looking out for the lonely is a major part of friendship from a divine point of view. You know, the craving for friendship is really strong, isn't it? And it is a craving. And I've seen how strong that craving is. It's so strong that once we have our circle of friends, we are extremely reluctant to open that circle up to others. For example, passing on of information. All right? Knowledge is power. And we sometimes try and control our friendship group by not passing on knowledge to other people outside the circle. I'll share it only with my friends. And of course, social media has increased that controlling. It's actually a form of bullying. I'm not going to tell you. And of course, we get jealous of our friendship group if someone else is speaking and spending more time with our friend than we are. I know it. I know it happens. Because we have a powerful natural fear of losing a friend. Oh, yes, we can be friendly enough and be polite, be nice to each other, say hello, shake a brother's hand or a sister's hand. But it's one thing to be friendly, brothers and sisters. It's another thing entirely to be a friend. Now, children are no different. In fact, it's heartbreaking for parents to watch your child struggle to make friends. One of my children really struggled to make friends. And many a night was spent with her on her bed in tears. And some children, the strength and the desire for friendship is so strong with children that if they don't have any real ones, well, they make up imaginary ones. Now, of course, adults don't do that, do they? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. Brothers and sisters, what do you think makes Facebook such a success? Where you can pretend to have lots of friends. Do you keep meaningful relationships with all of them? Of course you don't. But they make you feel good, but they're not real. You know, social media is a booming business. People need to feel connected. But I hate to say it, brothers and sisters, Facebook is not real friendship. If you're relying on Facebook for fulfilling relationships, you're going to get hurt because it can't do it. Remember that phrase? A help meet. The idea behind it is face to face. Someone you can look in the eye or hear their voice and share in a way that gets the sense of the real person, hear their tone in their voice, see the expression on their face. Well, I think we've established that the bond of friendship provides balance, it provides security, well-being, a sense of fulfillment to those who find it. So, you know, taking all that on board, it's no wonder that at the very heart of the gospel is God's desire for us to be his friends. And you might say, hey, Brother Steve, that's going a bit far. How could I ever dare call God my friend? How could we ever be treated as his equal? Well, one person was called God's friend. It's in the Bible. Abraham was the friend of God. Abraham is the one that the promises about the gospel was made to. Galatians 3 shows that the heart of the gospel was mentioned to Abraham, and Abraham was called by God to be his friend. I wonder how you regard your relationship with God. Not what is your relationship. I know what it is. Many of you are baptized. I know that. It's a covenant relationship you have with God. That's what we say. I know that. You know that. But how do you perceive the status of that relationship? What are the titles that you would use? What are the descriptive words? Well, what are the options? Well, here's just some suggestions. Maybe you've seen yourself in this way during your development in the truth. But I want you to notice that all of them have very definite distinctions between them. Each one defines someone who's superior and one who is inferior. The superior over the inferior. You know, take king and subject. You just can't call in on a royal, can you? You can't just invite yourself to tea with the Queen, for example. She makes the invitation, not you. There's a distinction between her and her subjects. They are not equal. Now, having said that, I'm sure the Queen does have friends that she treats as equal, even though they're still subject to her. I'm sure she said to some, look, I'm asking you as a friend when there's a tough decision that needs to be worked out. So what's our perception of our relationship with God? Well, I wonder if it's a bit like mine before I began this study some years ago. I wonder if you followed a similar pattern to what I did. You know, prior to our baptism, God we viewed as the creator, didn't we? And we were his creation. He was the potter and we were the clay. He made us. He was our maker. But then we got baptized. And if you, like me, had Romans 6 read at our baptism, you may have moved on in your understanding of God to that of a master now, and we are his loyal, willing servants. That's what's described, isn't it, in Romans chapter 6. But then maybe we move on even further as a relationship deepens, and maybe we get married. Maybe we have children, and suddenly we now start to see and feel and understand and appreciate of God, not just as a master, but also a loving father. And we are his beloved children. And that might be enhanced if you get married and have children of your own. And you appreciate even more the relationship that you have with God as a parent. And you are his child. And you are part of a large family of his children. Now, is that as far as you go, brothers and sisters? Is that as far as you see or perceive your relationship with God? Well, for me, for many years, it was. But I'm going to share with you that I believe that there's one more level, a higher level again, a beautiful, unimaginable level. It's one where the creator of the universe and our covenant Father invites us to become one of his most intimate friends. You just think about that. You know, the term friend, as a friend, the term friend does not disclose any status at all, does it? There's age has no relevance, gender isn't revealed. Neither does your status, whether you're rich or poor. You've got no idea about the other person if you just say, he's my or she's my friend. Friends, the term friends, demonstrate equality. And you think, wow, is that even possible? Well, God is inviting us to be alongside him as his friend. Now, we see it in our children. In fact, we'd all like our children to grow up. What for? To keep staying your children? Of course not. I'd like my children to grow up so that one day I can call them my friends. Now, have a look at this with me. Let's go to Romans chapter 5. Let's look at this concept of friendship being right at the heart of the gospel. And Romans 5, of course, is right in the centerpiece of that section of scripture dealing with the atonement, with the gospel of salvation. Here's Paul in Romans chapter 5, outlining in simple terms the purpose of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, what we might call the crux of the gospel message. He says this in verse 10, "For if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his son, much more being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life." This word enemies, it's quite a strong word. You see there, the Greek is ekthros, active hostility, deep-seated hatred, irreconcilable enmity. In fact, it is put in complete contrast to friendship in James 4 verse 4. We won't go back there. You may like to write James 4 verse 4 next to Romans 5 verse 10, because in James 4 verse 4, this idea of friendship and enmity comes up in both the noun form and the adjective. Friendship with the world is enmity with God. He who is a friend of the world is the enemy of God. So if you're a friend of the world, you're not a friend of God. That's what he's saying. So, for if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his son. Now, this word reconcile, the Greek word katalasso, it means to change mutually from the word kata, which is an exact point, and alasso, which means to change. So the idea of reconciled means to decisively change, as when two parties reconcile when coming together and change their positions from being enemies to being, well, friends. The meaning clearly is obvious. Even though the word friend is not there, the idea of being completely changed from enemies must mean we've been changed from enemies to friends. The point of Romans 5 verse 12 is that we are no longer enemies. For if when we were enemies, well, if you're not an enemy, what are you? The point is clarified further when we consider the preceding verses. In fact, you'll probably notice that chapter 5 has a repeating phrase which becomes the key words of Romans 5. This idea of much more. It's there in verse 10 that we read, but it's also in verse 9, verse 15, verse 17, 20. Much more. Well, verse 8 and 9 are the two sides of the same argument that verse 10 captures. But God commendeth his love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Well, that matches the first half of verse 10. For if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his son. But then verse 9 says, much more then, being now justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. We have this mirror statement. Both contain the contrasting statements that are bridged by this phrase, much more. You see, prior to the death of Christ, this is what you were, but by his death, this is what you are now. And an incredible change has taken place. Verse 10 says that the death of Christ makes us no longer enemies. And verse 8 and 9 says that the death of Christ justifies. Now, remember that word justifies, because what does it mean to be justified? You'll see, verse 9, much more than being justified. Well, just go back to verse 1. Verse 1 says, therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace. Well, that's the complete opposite to being enemies as well. See, the language is all about friendship. Friends share peace. You're no longer an enemy. You have peace with God. Brother John Carter, in his book on, or commentary on Romans, says this about verse 1. I thought it was rather interesting. We have peace, he says, because we have received this reconciliation. He knows that because he knows what verse 10 is going to say. The two are inseparably linked. There can be no peace without friendship with God in any sphere of human life. How vain are human efforts to attain it. How the Bible goes to the roots of the matter, not only laying bare the source of the trouble, but also making known the only remedy. So through the death and resurrection of Christ, God has opened the opportunity for us to develop a deep and meaningful friendship with him, the creator of the universe. The death of Christ begins that fresh friendship. We're reconciled, and the resurrection of Christ will seal it forever. We're saved. Come back to Matthew chapter 7. There's some eye-opening words here for sure, said by the Lord Jesus Christ. words in the Sermon on the Mount. Our daily readings have only just gone through the Sermon on the Mount. Seen these words before? Quite scary, I find. Verse 21 to verse 23. There will be a group of people who will arrive at the judgment seat, and Jesus is going to say to them, I don't know you. They're going to come and say, well, hang on, aren't we your friends? Have a look at verse 21. Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works? We're your friends. Look at all the things we've done. We didn't do them for anyone else. We did them for you. Verse 23. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. This phrase or word knew is the Greek word gnosko. It actually means to get to know. It's not oida. Oida is perfect knowledge. This is the word where you've got to grow in your knowledge. So what Jesus is really saying here, I never got to know you. Would you like those words said to you? You never built a meaningful relationship with me. I never got the chance to know who you are because you never got the chance, or you never took the chance to get to know me. So we may not be an enemy in the sense of hate or enmity, but there's going to be some at the judgment seat who never became friends, never learned how to be a true friend. We'll come to John 15. Clearly, the Lord thought the same in the upper room when he was speaking to his close and intimate friends at the Last Supper. John 15. Maybe this could be called the friendship chapter of the New Testament. In verse 13 to 15, Jesus shares some thoughts in the upper room with his disciples about friendship. Judas has left. He's gone out. He was actually offered the sop, which was a symbol of friendship. Judas accepted it, but of course, he rejected it in his heart. He'd left the room, and the coming trial and crucifixion was weighing heavy on our Lord now. Judas is gone. It's not too long now. But instead of thinking of himself, his thoughts and his attention was on the 11. And in verse 13, he says, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Ye are my friends, if you do whatsoever I command you. Henceforth, I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard of my Father, I have made known unto you. I just want you to notice there, he says, look, you know, and I know from Romans 6 that our true status is servants. That's what we are. We're servants of righteousness, servants to Christ. He truly is the master. We are not his equal. We can never, ever treat Jesus as our equal. But look what he says. He says, I don't call you servants, even though you are. I call you friends. Wow. You know, the basis of why he does so is because he's prepared, as a friend does, to reveal his secrets to them, tell them what he's going to do. That's what friends do. Open up and reveal their plans and hopes and purposes to someone else, to a friend. Masters don't do that. Well, you wouldn't dare do that, would you? You wouldn't leave the servants with knowledge that might be able to be used against you. All right, you keep the servants in ignorance. The servant is beneath them. You own the servant. And servants can't always be trusted. They're not got the motive of doing it out of love, have they? They can't be trusted with sensitive and personal information. But here's Jesus saying, I know you're servants, but I'm going to call you friends. You know, he has revealed to us, his servants, his friends, valuable secrets. Secrets which, if the enemy could understand, would change the course of history. And of course, we know he's revealed the secrets as found in the book of Revelation. It's been revealed to his friends. He did that. He gave all the secrets about what's going to come on the earth. And the enemies of Jesus Christ haven't got a clue what the book of Revelation is all about because they don't know him. But his friends do. They understand his language. And Jesus is, of course, doing exactly the same thing here in John 15 as his Father has done. He's copying his Father in calling his servants his friends. So we want to just concentrate just for a little bit on one individual with whom God did exactly that. He revealed his secrets to his friend Abraham. Now, I would often ask the audience if they would know how many times does Abraham get called God's friend in the Bible. A bit harder to do that over Zoom, so I'll put them on the screen. 3 times Abraham is called the friend of God. Twice in the Old Testament, once in the New. Let's go to that first one in 2 Chronicles chapter 20. There's something that's interesting here that should capture our imagination as Bible students and say, hang on a minute, what's going on? 2 Chronicles chapter 20. It's the days of Jehoshaphat. The nations of Ammon and Moab had come up against Judah and Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat and Judah are in dire straits. How can they withstand them? So what Jehoshaphat does is that in verse 5, Jehoshaphat stood in the congregation of Judah and Jerusalem in the house of Yahweh before the new court, and he says a prayer. It's a wonderful prayer. It's a beautiful prayer. We haven't time to go through all the details of this prayer. I'm going to just summarize it for you. He says, aren't you the God of heaven? Do you not rule over all kingdoms and nations? Is there not in your hand power and might? And then he says, did you not drive out the previous inhabitants of this land and give it to the descendants of Abraham, your friend forever? Verse 7, art not thou our God who didst drive out the inhabitants of this land before thy people Israel and gave it to the seed of Abraham, thy friend forever? And then he goes on and says, will you not judge them? That's Ammon and Moab, O God. For we can do nothing of ourselves and do not know what to do except look up to you. And of course, we know Yahweh hears this prayer and wrought a great victory. But here's the question that you should ask from this prayer. On what grounds does Jehoshaphat call Abraham God's friend? You see, Jehoshaphat's not making this up on the spot in this prayer. He knows that Abraham is called God's friend. How does he know that? He knows that God has already called Abraham his friend. And so now Jehoshaphat appeals to the God of Abraham, who has made Abraham his friend. Where in the record would you find that? Jehoshaphat is the first of the 3 times the phrase Abraham, the friend of God, occurs. If I was looking at Isaiah, I would say, well, of course Isaiah knows. He got it from Jehoshaphat. Well, how does Jehoshaphat know? Where does it demonstrate that Abraham is God's friend so that Jehoshaphat can use it in his prayer on this occasion? What clues are there? Well, I went searching, of course. I went looking through the through the scriptures to try and find this phrase, and I couldn't find it. I said, it's got to be here. It's got to be in the record. Jehoshaphat knows it's in the record. Well, it is there, brothers and sisters. There's clues about it in Genesis 18. Let's go back to Genesis 18 and try and unravel what this mystery might seemingly be. We find this in Genesis 18, verse 16, probably right down to verse 33, that two angels have gone down to Sodom to rescue Lot's family and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, but one angel stays remaining with Abraham. It's the Yahweh angel. We know this from our first principles, from our studies on God manifestation, that this is the Yahweh angel. He's called Yahweh. 3 angels came to Abraham, but only 2 went down to Sodom, and 1 stayed with Abraham, whose name is given as Yahweh. And it says in verse 17, and Yahweh, this is the Yahweh angel, said, shall I hide from Abraham this thing that I do? And what we have here is a real meaningful discussion, really, between 2 friends. And this Yahweh angel speaks to Abraham face to face. You'll see in verse 22, the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom. That's the 2 angels that left. But Abraham stood yet before Yahweh, face to face, talking to this Yahweh angel, as one speaks to his friend. You know, it's similar to Moses in that way, isn't it? God spoke face to face with Moses, mouth to mouth, it really means. You know, Abraham was buried in Hebron, and the word Hebron means fellowship. Isn't that interesting? In fact, even in Arabic, the Arabs call it El Khalil, and El Khalil means the friend. So Abraham is known as the friend, both in the Arab sort of world and the Jewish world. Fellowship and friendship comes out of this story. Friendship and fellowship was how we started with Brother Dennis Gillett, wasn't it? Here it is, Abraham, buried in Hebron, means fellowship in some circles and friendship in others. And I want you to sort of note the real intimate relationship between Abraham and the angel in verse 17 to 19. The intimacy witnessed by the angel's thoughts being revealed, and their endearing thoughts towards his friend, Abraham. And the angel reveals his intentions to Abraham. And Jesus says that's what friends do. Friends reveal their secrets. And here's the angel saying, shall I hide it? No, Abraham's my friend. I'll reveal my secrets. And later on in the chapter, we won't be reading this in any great depth later on, Abraham is able to plead with the angel and negotiate the number from 50 down to 10. And this has been in our readings this week too, hasn't it? Being able to negotiate this number is a heartfelt discussion between 2 very close friends, the result of which both go away content in their relationship and trust for each other. Abraham didn't feel hard done by, the angel didn't feel hard done by. They were friends. But where's the word friend in the chapter? Where's friendship actually mentioned? Well, it's in verse 19. It's not correct in the authorized version, so that's why we miss it. In verse 19, verse 18, we haven't read that yet. Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of Yahweh to do justice and judgment, that Yahweh may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. And it's this word know, okay? We saw it in the New Testament. Jesus says, I never knew you. And we saw that that really has the idea of, I never got to know you as a friend. Well, it's the same here in the Old Testament. The Hebrew word yada. It means to get to know. But in the Hebrew, it's not for I do know him. The Hebrew really is for I have known him. And Rotherham really does bear this out. And you may like to write this next to verse 19. Now, Yahweh had said, am I going to hide from Abraham what I do? When Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have, past tense, become his intimate friend. Why? To the end that he may command his sons and his house after him. So shall they keep the way of Yahweh by doing righteousness and justice. To the end that Yahweh may bring unto Abraham what he hath spoken concerning him. So Yahweh went on and told about what would happen. So what's being said? This is telling us that Yahweh became Abraham's friend to help him accomplish what Yahweh knew he would not be able to do on his own if left to himself. I have become his friend so as to help him instruct his children in the right way, that I may make from him the great nation that I promised him. You know, I'm not sure how you understand those verses, but before this study, I used to understand this as the angel sort of thinking in his head, well, look at Abraham. I know Abraham. He's doing pretty good. He's looking after his children well, and I think he's doing a pretty good job. On that basis, I think I'll reveal to him my secrets. That's not what it's saying. The angel's saying that I've already become his friend. I befriended him back in Ur of the Chaldees. I became his friend so that I could help him raise his children in the way of Yahweh. And God had a plan to develop a people that would be like him. And so for that reason, it necessitated him to specially select an individual whom he could befriend and become a source of encouragement, helping him to develop his character, that he might then instruct others and help them to develop their character, to the point where God will be able to befriend them too. And so on, right down through to you and I today. Isn't that marvelous? I think that's just wonderful that God reached out to befriend Abraham before Abraham even knew who God was. If that's not a lesson for us to reach out to befriend others, to encourage them to be servants of Jesus Christ, I don't know what is. And of course, in Genesis 18 and 19, the whole context of the story of Sodom is that there's a clear contrast between Abraham and the men of Sodom. God could never befriend the men of Sodom. So he reveals his intentions to Abraham about their destruction. Isn't that marvelous? That's where in the record, Abraham is called the friend of God. Now, we don't have time really now. Time's escaped us here to go on to Isaiah 41 and James chapter 2. Isaiah 41 describes Abraham as a friend. The word friend there is the Hebrew word Ahab, which actually is a word which is very intimate. It means a lover, one who is loving and beloved, intimate, more than just a companion. What a better heritage, brothers and sisters, than for you and I to be called the children of Abraham, my beloved. So just to finish off, I think we'll leave our consideration of Abraham there. Can you see how it's just such a crucial part of the whole idea of the gospel, that God is calling out of the nations a people for his name who will become his friends, just like him, fill the earth with his glory. We can never call God our equal, but he's inviting us to be so. And so this word friend, this idea of friend, in the Old Testament, it's mostly translated as the word love. As we said, Young's literal translates Isaiah 41 as Abraham, my lover. And it's translated as friend in a few places and as the word love in a few places. I've just put a smattering of examples up there. And one of them, of course, you'll notice from Proverbs 27, our reading, the wounds of a friend are better than the kisses of an enemy. And the picture of Judas comes up, doesn't it? Kissing Jesus' hand as if he's his best friend, but actually he's just betrayed him. The wounds of a friend are far more enriching and rewarding than all the kisses a pretend friend might give. And in the New Testament, the word is philos, which means to be a dear friend, to act friendly. And this theme goes all the way through. You may like to take it up and have a look at the friendships mentioned in the Bible between David and Jonathan, between Naomi and Ruth, and even between the bad characters of Herod and Pilate, who became friends on the day Jesus was tried and crucified. So that's my thoughts on the ideas of friendship that came out of the thoughts of Brother Dennis Gillett, with that friendship is the highest form of fellowship. So just to summarize, I think 4 points will summarize what we've seen, and I hope that you can take this away and build and enthuse each other as friends in the truth, which in today's world with the pandemic is becoming challenging, isn't it? And we've had to adapt new ways, including Zoom, and social media has some benefits in maintaining our relationships and friendships. But here's some 4 points just to take away as a summary before finishing. We've seen, brothers and sisters and young people, that it is not good for us to be alone. We are made social beings. We need interaction. We also learnt that although we are God's children, he has actually given us an invitation to be his friends. And we saw that the death and resurrection of Christ are right at the core of that invitation. And then we saw finally that in order to be fulfilled in that invitation, we are to follow the example of Abraham, who was called the friend of God. So thank you. Lovely to share this time with you, brothers and sisters, and God bless every one of you as we wait the return of Jesus Christ, the one who's willing to call us his friends. Thank you.